Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, and I want to thank you for spending the morning with me and hearing a little bit about my journey. I also want to say congratulations to all of you for being here. This is a demonstration of your desire for lifelong learning, continuous development, and investing in yourselves. It also shows a commitment of your organization that you were selected to join this summit over the next 2 days. So again, congratulations. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to talk to you about leading leaders, but that's just a stage of my personal journey. And to be able to get to that point of leading leaders, I learned so much along the way from many people I worked with and worked for. And so I'm going to tell you about my journey and some lessons learned along the way. So when I think of the traits of strong leaders, I think of leading by example, lifelong learning, being observant, being trusted, wanting to develop a team of experts around you, being humble, and then always making sure you're willing to take risks for yourself and your organization. If I think of some of my principles of how I manage my team, it's kind of simple, boils down to 5 tenets that I look for. Collaboration. Always needing to collaborate within your organization, with your customers, with your suppliers, with your peers, with your senior leaders, with your team. Managing your team, very important. When you're a leader of people, that's one of the most important roles that you'll ever have. You have an obligation. You have the blessing to be able to be influential to other people's careers, their choices, their developments. Always needing to make sure you manage your team. Meet your metrics. That kind of is a simple one. It's what you're supposed to do for your business role, but that's, always meet your metrics. So again, I'm going to start at the beginning of my journey and just kind of tell you about lessons learned along the way. I started out of college with my first professional role with Wiley Electronics in Minneapolis, Minnesota, for those of you who remember Wiley. I started as an inside sales manager and then moved to field sales. And, before I do that, I'm originally from a small town in northern Minnesota. I'm the 5th of 6 children. And probably my biggest supporter my whole life has been my mom. She's the biggest champion. And my mom, my 86-year-old mother, is watching this via live stream today. And she was so excited to when she found out it was going to be live stream. My sister's over there helping her with the technology. So I have to give a shout out. Hi, Mom. So I started in Wiley Electronics, and it was fantastic. First job out of college, electronics distribution. I remember one of the lessons I had there was about the learning, the lifelong learning. One day they said they were going to start a total customer satisfaction role. So each branch across the US was going to have a total customer satisfaction champion. We were going to learn from corporate different programs. We'd roll them out to the branch. And at the end of the year, there was going to be bringing together all the total customer satisfaction champions to Irvine, California to celebrate the achievements. And they were looking for someone to, offer and to do that for the branch. And I was pretty young. But what I heard was free trip to California. But I was super excited. And I remember I raised my hand and I was selected to do that role for the branch. And I was the only one who raised my hand. And part of that was because, a lot of people only want to focus on the job that contributes directly to their pay plan or their bonus schedule or what have you, where throughout my whole career, I've always raised my hand for the new challenges and new opportunities. And you become known for being the person that wants to expand and learn and grow and bring value. So I always say, raise your hand when you have those opportunities. I also am a big believer in taking some risks, calculated risks, but risks within your career. And after about 3 years with Wiley, my husband was playing professional hockey, and he was playing in the kind of bouncing around the minor leagues. And he came home one day and said he had an offer from this team or that team or a team in Weiden, Germany. And I laughed. Well, the next day I go to work and find out that Wiley is being purchased by Weber, a German-based holding company that had a sister division, EBV. So I go home and go, well, we should totally move to Germany because I'll just go work for EBV, and that'll be nice. I'll work there, very naive, they'll want to hire me. I'll go there, I'll work for 1 year while you play hockey, and it'll be a fun little experience. And so we did what we always do when we really have to make a decision. We get in the car, because when you have to make a decision, sometimes my husband and I have found that if you get in the car with the commitment that you're not getting out of the car till you make the decision, at some point you just want to get out of the car. And so we actually decided, we were living in Minneapolis, and we said, well, maybe we should start driving to Hibbing in case we're going to tell our parents we're moving to Germany in a few weeks. And we did. So moved to Germany. It was fantastic. I asked for an interview with EBV. I was very fortunate that I got an interview and I was selected. And even though they weren't quite sure what they were going to do with me because I was only committed for a year, there was a statement, well, we just made this acquisition. We're sure you'll be able to help us as we integrate the companies and the strategies. So I started off at EBV, and I had a lot of learnings during that time. We actually went for 1 year. We stayed for 8. It was a great time of growth and personal development. My children were born in Germany. I have a 23-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter. But it was phenomenal growth and opportunities being there and being an American in a European company and the learnings that we had. I was so fortunate because I had a pan-European role. So I traveled to other countries, and I supported the organization in their supply chain development. And I got to learn from colleagues, go to great restaurants, eat great food, but mostly learn from my colleagues in the other countries of how they did business. And that openness when you ask questions, when you want to learn and understand how people do business, it's phenomenal. One of the most telling examples I had of a leader leading by example was at EBV. I'd been there a short period of time, and we were actually integrating a warehouse. So they came and they asked the office staff, we'd like you from 5 to 10, basically kind of every other day, to go down to the warehouse after work to count parts to help consolidate this warehouse. And I thought, okay, that's great. Someone go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, others Tuesday, Thursday, alternate until it's done. So I'm in the warehouse. They trained us. It was, fun. And we're doing the work. And one night I'm working with my friend, and someone comes up, very thick accent, Bavarian accent. And we are introduced. And he goes, die Amerikanerin. And I said, yes. And so after he walked away, I said to my friend Ushi, I said, who was that? I didn't quite catch the name. And she goes, that was Peter Goodler, the CEO. And I just kind of stopped and I said, but he's, it's 10 o'clock at night. We're picking parts in the warehouse. And he goes, she said, yes. Peter would never ask people to do something he would not do himself. The only difference is Peter will be here every night, and he's only asking the other staff to come every other night. And I thought, wow, that is leading by example. And I've never forgotten it. By the way, one more Peter Goodler story. I'm there a few more weeks, and I happen to recognize our offices were near each other, so I'd see him and just, getting to know each other. So I'd say, oh, Peter, we were talking. And I'm there a couple weeks, and I noticed that people are referring to him as Herr Goodler. And I'm calling him Peter. And so I asked my friend, I'd never gone to Germany before I moved there, did not speak the language. So I asked her, and she said, yeah, we all refer to him as Herr Güttler. That's the way it is here in Germany. And I said, okay, so I mustered up a little courage, and then I went and I said, Peter, I wanted to, apologize. I recognize that you're referred to as Herr Güttler, and I've been referring to you as Peter, and I just wanted you to know I apologize. And he said, oh, Lynn, don't worry about that. You're an American. Of course you should call me Peter. That's normal for your culture. So don't feel bad at all. And that started the awareness, my learning about cultural awareness and the importance of both recognizing, and learning from the cultures that you're working with, as well as what you bring from your own culture. By the way, when it comes to that, I highly recommend a book, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. It actually is a short read for like every country that you can go to. And it just tells you cultural norms, how to do business, how to make sure you're being polite in someone else's country and culture. I also highly recommend not looking at a menu and just getting a reference from whoever you're traveling with when you have those opportunities. Because I tell you, the best food I've eaten is stuff that I have not selected, but rather just listening to people from their home countries. So there are some examples of, like with Peter, cultural awareness, leading by example, which I think are very important. And my time in Europe was outstanding, 8 years. But after a certain amount of time, we said maybe we should get these kids closer to their grandparents when they're getting ready to start school. And during that time, by the way, EBV was then acquired by Avnet. So I'd been there 4 years with EBV under MEMIC. EBV was then acquired by Avnet. And I'd done a number of different roles, managing corporate accounts, supply chain, and, I'd managed a large team when you're looking at the pan-European strategic accounts. And it was fantastic. But again, wanting to relocate back to the US. So I asked to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona, where our corporate headquarters are. And Avnet accommodated that request. And I came back as a role of a global account manager. And was an individual contributor role. So I'd gone from managing a large team to being an individual contributor. And this is when the large customers were starting to want to look at global approaches from the distributors. So instead of being local with the different countries, negotiating globally. And just as a side note, I started with Sanmina, then I went to Jabil. But what I learned was the importance of matrix management, influencing people, having them not be a direct report or direct, part of my team, but needing to work with people. How do you bring value? How do you extract value from other people when you're leading a matrixed organization? And it was a great time of development and innovation of how we were going to service those customers and change the way that model worked. It was also a time when I decided to get my MBA. And so at the time, my children were 6 and 8. I went home and I told my husband, I have a great idea. I want to spend $70,000 we don't have. I want to spend the next 2 years getting my MBA in the exec MBA program, and I'll leave you with the kids to deal with all that. And so I did. And it was a time, and I said to him, it was something when I had been talking with my manager about my growth plans and my aspirations, because when he said, what do you see for yourself in the future? I said, well, I want to be CEO of Avnet. And so he's like, okay, well, if that is your desire, then let's talk through what you need to do and what changes, development areas you had. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to get my master's degree. I'd been doing well, in growing my career, but it's thought, okay, can we take that next step and will this help? And it was a fantastic experience. Very difficult when you talk about work-life, school balance. I think that's go out the window for those 2 years, but great experience for myself. I think it strengthened areas that I was strong. It identified areas where I could continue to grow. And I think at the end, it helped differentiate me in my career plans. So, it was also during that time when I kind of would get some additional promotions where I was going from being a global account manager, looking after a single account, to as Avnet United grew and we started adding more accounts, I was leading that organization, with a team of global account managers working for me. And that's really, I think, when I started to more engage with leaders. And as a leader, when you're engaging with leaders, that takes a different form. It's always, kind of not a job interview, but you always, if you have that opportunity, you want to use it wisely with your leadership team to keep them aware of what you're working on. So one day I was going to fly from Phoenix, Arizona to San Jose, California, just for the day with my boss for some meetings. And he came into my office and he said, "Hey, Lynn, just wanted to give you a heads up that we're on the same flight as Roy Valley tomorrow on this trip." And Roy was the CEO of Avnet at the time. And I said, "Okay. And thanks for letting me know." So he left and I called my husband and I said, "I'm going to be home late tonight." And he said, "Okay, why?" I said, "I have to prepare for chit chat." He goes, "Okay." But I sat there and I sat down and I thought, okay, you've heard Roy Valley, you've talked to him. What is he likely to ask? And I thought, oh, he's going to want to know, what are my customers seeing? What am I seeing in the market? What's taking place with suppliers? And then I made a list. And what are the things I would want Roy to be aware of that I'm working on that he may not be aware of unless I bring it to his attention? So I made a list, and then I made calls, called customers, called suppliers, made sure I had relevant new data points. Went home, ironed my clothes. I got up earlier than I've ever got up for a flight, because normally I like to come in hot, to the gate. But I got there early and was prepared and waiting. And sure enough, Roy came in, we got a Starbucks, we sat and we visited, and he said, "So, Lynn, what are you seeing in the market? What are you hearing from customers and suppliers?" And we had that discussion, throughout the day. And I was pleased with how it went. But what was very interesting was a couple days later, our chief legal officer, I saw him in the cafeteria and he congratulated me. And I said, "Well, thank you, David. I'm not sure why, because it was just kind of random." And he said, "Well, I spent time with Roy. Roy said he spent time with you. And he said he was very impressed with the work that you're doing and what you're delivering to the organization. Well done." And I thought to myself that it's something that I always want to remember to do, to be prepared for, and to make sure others are prepared. Like I had, spent time preparing for my chit chat because I was going to be a specific opportunity. But what I also recognize is I should also always be prepared for those opportunities, because you never know exactly when you're going to have that visibility with a senior executive within the organization. So as I continue on my journey, I actually was promoted then to, this was a lateral move first. Sorry, I have to think about what my timeline. So I'm running Avnet United, and I get a tap on the shoulder and said, "Lynn, we'd like you to go manage our semiconductor supplier relationships as an individual contributor." And this was a time when the suppliers were consolidating and buying each other. And we had at Avnet, we had anyway, regional supplier management structures in place, but they wanted a global lead because suppliers wanted global contracts. They were consolidating their distribution partners. They wanted, terms and conditions, payment, plans and everything. So at first I was like, well, I'm managing this large team, and I felt like I was doing pretty well to move to an individual contributor role. But it was also kind of a big challenge for the company at the time. And we needed to move in a global structure where it had been regional, and I'd done that on the customer side. So that was, again, that opportunity to be an individual contributor, to help work on one of the biggest challenges that the company had. Again, a matrix managed organization where you're driving influence. And it was super fun, kind of engaging with the suppliers at a different level than I had done before. And so I learned from that, career development isn't always, a straight path. A lot of times there's lateral moves that take place, and being open to those new opportunities and new challenges. And again, being the one who says, yes, I'm up for that. I will learn. I want to take on this new challenge. Making sure you're being decisive in your decision making, being held accountable for it, making sure you have safe spaces created for your team members when it is a stressful time and decisions need to be made. And then, just continuing to develop the personal side and the trusted side. I think as a leader as well, when we talk about trusted relationships, you want to be trusted by your team, by your direct team, by your extended team. And I want to have people that I trust, obviously. And I think having that group of trusted advisors for you personally is really important. I think back to my career, back to the Wiley days, back to my time in Europe. I have people that I worked with in the past, mentors or sponsors that I've had that I still reach out to for career advice on a regular basis. And I think that if you have that, and people who care about you and really will give you that good advice, and also call you on things when maybe you've gone a little bit off the path, or you're not addressing the situation appropriately. And so having that, I think, is great. And there have been many times I've gone to people I've worked with and I'm like, was I a little tough in that last call? Did I come across, where I should have been a little more mellow? So I've recognized too if I am getting a little upset and a little emotional. And I ask people for their opinion. And I've gotten to the point now where, my team will freely and give their opinion and advice, knowing it's welcome by me to hear their perspective of how I'm handling, whatever situation it might be. And I'll leave a little bit of time for questions, but I also want to, obviously on a professional journey, the personal side is really important as well. And I mentioned I have my 2 children, and you've heard about my husband a few times. He's a great guy, by the way. I've traveled their entire lives. I think I went back to work and started traveling, when they were about 4 or 5 months old, each time. And I also made sure that my kids were part of the decisions that we made along the way. We had a plan every summer. We go to our cabin in Minnesota. We go out on the boat, and I'm very particular about my boat, but once a summer, we get pizza and wings, and we go sit in the middle of the lake, and we talk how it's going. And we've done this from the time they were very little. In fact, when I went back to get my MBA, before we agreed to do it, we went to the boat, sat in the boat, talked to the kids, and made sure, so they're part of it. They're part of the journey. And I always ask them along the way, is this working for you? Are you okay having a working mom who, I was not able to volunteer in the classroom or be a class mom? I was very present when I was with them, but, I miss things. That's just the way it is. And they always said, yep, they were always very supportive. And I appreciated that when they were young. Now as young adults, I think they have a greater understanding of the role that I have and the accomplishments that I've made in my career. And, they're very proud. And I have a story I like to tell, and it's with Jackie. Jackie was interviewing me. It was during COVID, and was doing an interview with me for a podcast. And my daughter was in the other room. And Jackie had asked me tips for, being a working mom and how do you manage that. And I said to her, some things like,
Yes, I always make sure at the beginning of the school year, I go in and I have a different color in my calendar for each kid's for, their sporting activities or parent-teacher conferences. And I do my best to prioritize around those activities, which I think is super smart. But I was kind of going over those things, but saying how I had missed different activities. I remember missing my son's 10th birthday, and he had a birthday party, but the day of his birthday party, I had to be overseas. And he woke up, he was a little sad, crying a little bit that mom wasn't there, but he recognized very quickly that it isn't a big deal. Well, a couple of years later, I missed my daughter's birthday, and she was like, yep, that's fair. She missed one of yours, she missed one of mine. But after Jackie and I had that interview, my daughter came out and said to me, Mom, I heard you talking about how you miss things growing up when I was growing up and you weren't always able to be there. But in my memory, you were always there. And I said to her, Megan, can I tell that story to everybody? Because I think as women, our journeys are very different. We need to support each other, and we need to recognize we have a different journey than our male colleagues. And having been a working mom, the fact that my daughter thinks that I was always there because I was a present mother. I was not always there. I was a little worried about her long-term memory for a second. But it was, just a beautiful feeling that that's her memory of me. And I really wanted to share that with everybody here because I think as we continue this journey, I want to always try and make it easier for the next generation of women leaders. If you can inspire, if you can empower, if you can tell a story that resonates, I would have loved to have something like Women in Electronics earlier in my career. And I've said that to Jackie, and that's why one of the reasons when she mentioned this, I said that would be wonderful because for me, I had opportunities to, network with other companies and other organizations when I was much older, farther advanced in my career before I had those opportunities. Whereas I think men have kind of more natural opportunities throughout their careers. And so we have to take something like this because I'll be honest, even when I was younger in my career, if, the guys were going to go golfing on a weekend, if they hadn't invited me, I would not have wanted to go, right? I would have wanted to stay with my kids. And so that's why you have to create these opportunities. So I hope I said a few things today that might have resonated. What I'd like to do before we go to we have a few minutes for Q&A, end with one thought. And this is something I say, when I go to the universities and I'm talking to people at different stages in their career. Very often, you get to that meeting, you get to the table, and people want to be hesitant or hold themselves back from participating or bringing their opinion or really jumping into things. I always say if you made it to the table, if you're in the meeting, you're there for a reason. People want to hear what you have to say. And when I think back to all these times in my career when I've had that opportunity, it's simple. Be prepared, be confident, and be yourself. And I think that being a truly authentic person, it makes life very easy. I'm the same person whether you see me in the boardroom, at the soccer game, at the ballet studio, when I was raising my kids, always the same. And I think being that authentic leadership is important, but you have to be, confident in. One of the things I always tell my team is I love it when someone has an idea that's better than mine. And if you say that a lot to people, they embrace it, and it's true. And I make a point when someone, comes and says, Lynn, I don't think we should do it this way. Here's a different approach. You are right. What a great idea. Thank you. This idea is so much better than mine. So I think that know that that's what your leadership is thinking as well. They want to hear your voice. You're there for a reason. And although not everybody may admit it, most people do like it when someone comes up with an idea that's better than theirs. And hopefully it can be yours. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions we want to take. We've got 15 minutes left in our session.
Thank you. There's many people here that are just in it, right? So when you have the mom guilt, when, for instance, my daughter was super sick when I'm heading out to come here and I have to leave her. And it's the guilt you feel as a mother when you literally cannot be there all the time and your instincts tell you you should. So how did you manage that mama guilt all those times you couldn't be there in the moment?
I don't think I managed it very well. Because I did have the guilt. And that's why I wanted to share Megan's story to me, because I wish I would have known at the time when I was beating myself up that her adult memories would be so different. And I tried to do some things. Like, for instance, I was going to school on the weekends when it was Megan's turn to prepare for her first communion, and when it was my son did it, I was able to do the weekend retreat with him at the church and all the activities that you do. Well, with Megan I couldn't because I had class and I had tests to do. So I actually flew in my mother-in-law to participate with Megan in that activity, and it was only the one of 2 times I cried while I was actually attending school and missing something. So yeah, you have the guilt, and I think it's okay. And if you cry a couple of times because you're sad, I think that's just very normal. But I hope that people who are in it recognize being present when you can, and keeping an open dialogue with your children about the choices that you're making and how it impacts them. For me, it made my children be part of the journey, which I think helped them, that they knew if they said, "This is not working for me, Mom," I would have taken a different path. So they always had a voice, an influence. And my children were my trusted advisors too. Is this working for me as a wife and mother? So that would be my advice. But the guilt is there. Just roll with it.
I had the pleasure of mentoring under this wonderful lady when I became a supplier manager with a global role. And so thank you, Lynn, you're amazing. I would love for you to tell the story about your daughter wanting to get into the high school, the specific high school in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
Because you talk about mom guilt. I'm not a mother, but I saw the story that you told today and just how you yourself went about preparing for your own career.
Mm-hmm.
Your daughter emulated that. Could you tell that?
So yeah, I think so. My daughter was going to public school for elementary and middle school, and she wanted to go to private high school where my son was already at, Notre Dame Prep, and she did have to prepare. And I can't remember exact. I think Gina might remember the story better than I do. But she did have to be accepted into the school, and she was really focused and determined that she would, she wanted to get accepted. And she did. I remember her setting up steps and goals, and when she was accepted into this high school, we celebrated with her, but it was a very important step for her. And I think for me, when I think about my children, right now my son is his first year master's program at the University of Arizona. He wants to go into the healthcare field, and so he's getting his degree in cellular and molecular medicine. So just started his first year. My daughter graduated from the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul in 3 years, and is working today. She actually's got a job where she interned and had no break from graduating to starting her career. So she was a little kind of bummed about that. I think she would have liked to backpack around for a while. But I'm very proud of my kids, but they do have that kind of drive, and they've certainly, witnessed that that I've demonstrated throughout my career. Yes, Claudia.
Do you want the mic? I have the microphone, but I have a question too. But I'll pass.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You go first.
Sorry, quickly. You seem you have been guided throughout your career by values such as continuous learning, collaboration, and innovation. Did you, or how did you identify your values so that they could guide you on your path, so you can say things like, "I want to be the CEO of Avnet," and be very clear about that?
Yeah, it is. I've always been very deliberate about my career, and it's something I like to tell people. You are responsible for your career. Your career development. Hopefully you have a manager who you have honest discussions with that guides you, and mentors. But you have to make sure that if you're not getting what you need, you seek it out with others. But for me, I think it was, I mentioned my biggest fan, my mom. I've been I've had quite support my entire life. I'll tell you a quick story of my first grade parent-teacher conference. So my mom comes home, again, fifth of 6 kids. So she comes home from my first grade parent-teacher conference, and she said, "Oh, your teacher said you're doing well in reading, you raise your hand, blah, blah." She also said you're bossy and you talk too much. And I was 6 years old. I loved my first grade teacher, so I was a little sad about that, but immediately in my head I thought, that Foursquare game would not have ever gotten off the ground had I not named myself captain and started picking the teams. But what my mom said to me was, "You know what, Lynn? I'm bossy. I talk too much too." And I thought, okay, you know what? I love my first grade teacher. I love my mom way more. And so I had that, I had a support structure from my family, friends, professional colleagues, what I've built for myself, to kind of give myself that confidence that you need to say, yeah, I want to be CEO. And I declared that at, mid-30s, and I've been on a path since then. And just wanting to make sure I am in that continuous learning stage, and how I continue to grow and develop others, right? And one time I went to someone, it was when I joined Avnet, and said, and he'd been there a long time, and I said, I wonder if you'd mentor me. He goes, absolutely not. We're going to mentor each other, because I have a lot to learn from you based upon your global experience. And so I think it's that kind of combination of having a supportive network, and then some internal guiding principles, and that kind of confidence to take risks and be bold.
So I was curious, and I know you have been through this a bit in knowing your career at Avnet. What is your approach or your advice when you're leading a new team and you have a large group of leaders that have been there quite a long time, and maybe they're not performing at the level you want them to, but they have the reputation or the relationships that you feel may, overshadow you as a leader? So what's your approach and how you worked with them?
And I have experienced that type of situation throughout my career. And it can be a little uncomfortable. I never want to lower the bar for anyone. I want to keep the bar raised for everybody on my entire team. And I think when you're clear with your expectations with the team, and just keep holding them accountable to that, clear metrics, very defined, that need to be achieved, and the way in which you're expecting that person to operate. I found throughout my career that when it doesn't work, it's mostly because the person that I'm working with doesn't want to be held to those standards, and they self-select a different role for themselves. But I never want to have different levels of expectations for different people. I don't think that's fair. You either rise up or, find a different path. But it's not easy, and especially when people have been in roles for long times, and it's very, very well known. But I've also been fortunate I've been very clear, like when I've gone to my leaders to say how I'm going to address a personnel issue, to get guidance. Never do it alone. Reach out to someone to get guidance to make sure they're supportive of you, of the path that you're going to take if you have someone who's not quite performing. So that would be the advice. Got one over there, one over there.
Good morning, Lynn.
Morning.
We had heard from you about the importance of positive communication. How do you best deal with negativity within the workplace, whether it be a manager or a team member? Thank you.
Yeah, it's something that is very important to me. And I remember, being in our industry, I remember being at Avnet talking to Flex people who, they'd be like, your part isn't here on time, I'm going to charge a line down charge. It'd be an aggressive communication. And I always wanted to say, hey, let's work together to solve the situation. So I am very clear, like with my team, on my expectations of positive communication. I say that in the town halls. People know that's one of my principles. I want people to treat each other with respect and kindness, internally and externally. More so when you're dealing with a problem. And we've all been dealing with a lot of problems for the past years between customers, suppliers, internal. And if someone isn't following kind of that way in which I'm trying to lead, what I still try and maintain. I get frustrated like everybody else does, but I think the best thing you can do is continuously try to lead by example. I'm always, and it is challenging, right? But I try to remain factual and reasonable, regardless of, the situation that you're dealing with. And I think that it's a big demonstration of leadership, being calm under pressure, working through uncertainty. And that's what I think people see in great leaders, that calmness under pressure, and that does come across with how you communicate both internally and externally. But I think it's very, very important.
Okay, we're getting to time now, but we have one more. We have one more question, and we'll let Jennifer go.
Hello, hi. Thank you for sharing your story about your now older children. I have young children, and I really worry about how my travel impacts them every day. So thank you for sharing. I just have a quick question. You talked about your MBA as part of your growth journey. Do you recommend do you recommend others get their MBA as part of their growth journey?
I do. And it's difficult, right? There's a time commitment on top of time constraints that everybody has. There's different pathways for it as well. When more online type of programs, a little bit more flexibility. But I think that having that master's, if you're wanting to get to higher levels within an organization, it really, for me, it rounded out areas that I was not as strong in, just going throughout my career path. So I think it is something that is absolutely beneficial, especially as you aspire to more senior leader roles. And I think especially in electronics, it's becoming more the expectation that there's higher levels of education for those senior roles when they become available. Not always required, but personally I think it was a great experience for myself, so I can speak to that.